Hey, what's up YouTube? Pirate King Codex here. It's been a little while. Sorry for the lack of content lately. I've been feeling a little sick and I've just been busy in general. But we did have some treasure cups recently, so I did want to go over some of the deck lists before we move out of the OP-01 meta. OP-02 coming out soon. But now that we have some treasure cup results, let's take a look at some of the lists here. First up, we have the winning list from the Long Beach Treasure Cup. We have Bryant Nguyen's Red Luffy list. I actually played this one. Didn't do as well. I was playing Green Kid and was expecting to run into more Luffys. I didn't see any, so it was nice to see that there was a Luffy winner, which was a nice way to bring in one of the treasure cups here. So Red Luffy, we've seen before. I don't want to go into too much detail on most of these cards. I'm sure you see them at this point, but with Luffy, you are able to, once per turn, give this leader or one of your characters one rested Dawn, so you can get a little bit more value out of playing your cards. Really strong leader ability, especially with some of the cards here. This comes in handy with things that have a Dawn requirement, like Robin or Luffy. So with this deck, we do have Otama for the 2k counters, but that also comes in handy to give things minus 2000. And that can also be used with your Red Hawks or your Jet Pistol to KO things that are normally outside of the range. For 2020 Choppers, just a cheap blocker, good to have. One of the Nami from the starter deck, same as the Luffy leader, it allows you to attach a Dawn to one of your leaders or your characters. This is nice as a one of, and it has a 1000 counter, which is relevant. But this is also good to get a little bit extra value out of that Dawn again. And then you have your Nami card, your typical searcher to find your Straw Hat cards. So that'll be helpful for finding like your key targets like your Luffy. You can find Zoros, your Jet Pistols, your Robins. And then you have Gordon, another 2k counter. The ability I'm sure is relevant from time to time, but it's also 2k counter, which is useful. Then you have your Sanji, again another 2k counter. This one can be really strong in a pinch because you can add one card from your life area to your hand. This character gains 2000 power during the turn, and then give this character up to 2 Rested Dawn. So again, that's one way to beef up your character really quickly. It does have a steep cost to gain life, but it also gives you a card in hand. So this is good in a pinch, especially if you need to get some quick damage in. Just a one for the 2k counter Brook. This also gives Rested Dawn to characters, so when you play it, you immediately get value out of it. But it's good to have it as a one of here. Robin, one of your key cards in the deck. This allows you to KO some of the cheap blockers, characters 3000 or less, or other characters that are just on the board. You can help clear out the board using Robin, so it has a really strong ability. Then you rush the Oros, just really strong card for 3. You can just drop down Zoro. He comes in as a 5k, and you can beef him up from there. But having Rush is always relevant. And then one of the best cards in the deck is Luffy. Of course, this one also has Rush, but it comes in at 6000. And when it has 2 Dawn attached when attacking, your opponent can't activate blocker. So this is a great way to finish off the game. If your opponent is trying to flood the board with blockers, Luffy bypasses them. But he also has a good base attack. So then when you attach the 2 Dawn, he's going to be swinging for 8k. So then he's going to do some damage. And then this is a great addition is the Ben Beckman. It's a 7 cost for 9000 attack, but also has a counter, which I think is really relevant. This really helps to have something that's going to be a big body on the board without losing too many cards without having counters on it. So this is also really relevant for attacking for 9000. That's a really key number to hit for, because that would require at least 2 2k counter cards and then another card, or an event card that'll give plus 4000 to most leaders. So this is a really good card to have in here. And then you have the 9-drop Shanks with Rush. When attacking, your opponent cannot activate blocker on characters with 2000 power or less during this battle. So he bypasses those cheap blockers. So if your opponent doesn't have anything bigger than 2000 power, then Shanks is going to get through. He's going to attack for base 10,000, which is pretty big. And then we have Diablo Jump, which is like the Luffy. It allows you to bypass blocker for your Straw Hat crew type characters. So this is a good way to close out a game. If your opponent is trying to flood the board with blockers and they're at 0 life, then this will get through. So this is a good way to close out the game if you have this one. And then 3 copies of Gum Gum Red Hawk. I think this is a great counter. I think a lot of people don't give enough credit, but it's a 4,000 power counter. And then it also allows you to KO up to one of your opponent's characters of 4,000 power or less. Again, this is a great way to get rid of some blockers or even some cheaper attackers that your opponent might be trying to use. So this is a card that gives you good value. And then really relevant is actually the trigger. Give up to one of your opponent's leaders or characters minus 10,000 power during this turn. So I've lost some games with Kid where this trigger hit my leader. So then I wasn't able to put my Don all on the leader and swing in twice to try to close out a game. And that actually ended up costing me the game. So this could actually be really relevant. And then one was a round table. So during the main phase, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 10,000 power during this turn. So this is good for dealing with 8-cost Kid or just large characters in general. This will help you clear them out, make it so they're not a threat. So just as a 1-of, I think this is a good card. And another staple is Jet Pistol. This is just one of the best removal cards in the game. Just KO one of your opponent's characters with the power of 6,000 or less for 4, which is a pretty decent cost. That'll get rid of a lot of targets. And then again with the Otama, you can use this to get rid of things like the 8-cost Kid or a 7-drop Kid. So you can actually hit some pretty big things with the Jet Pistol. Next up, we have Benjamin Teo's list from winning the Sydney Treasure Cup. He was playing Law. So for Law, during your main phase, you can pay 2 Don. If you have 5 characters, return one of your characters to the owner's hand, then play up to 1 character with a cost of 5 or less of a different color as a return character from your hand. So this is a pretty tricky deck to play because you have to really think about how you're allocating your characters. You need to make sure that you're flooding the board. You need to make sure you have enough characters. So if your opponent starts clearing them out, that'll really set you back. But if you're able to flood the board with cheaper cards, you can start building towards bigger things like the Law or the Luffy, and that will help you to win the game there. So this deck has 2 different colors. It's a 4-life leader. So it is tricky because you do need to make sure that you are using enough character cards in order to use the leader ability effectively, and you need to really think about how you want to set up your board, and you have to think about what cards you have in order to use them effectively. So this one also runs the 4 Otama for the 2k counter, but it allows you to give one of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 power during the turn, which is really relevant. This one runs 4 choppers and it also runs 3 Capone, just cheap blockers for 1k. Again, you want to have these 1-drops to help fill up the board. Then you have your searchers, you have your Bonnie to look for the Supernova type cards, and you have your Nami to look for Straw Hats. Again, these are 1-drops so they can help you fill up the board. And then we have Cat Viper as a 4-of. So this will help you rest characters that are 3 or less. So this will help you to get rid of blockers on your opponent's side. So this is really relevant, and this is a good one to have at 4-of. 3 Brook, this is just a card that gives you 2k, but also can help you fill up the board. So you can basically play it for free by giving Rested Dawn to something on the board. And then we have Izo, which is another 2k counter. There's 3 of. It allows you to rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So this will hit targets that are a little bit bigger than the Cat Viper, but it's also 2k counter, so a lot of times you want to use it for that. But it comes good in a pinch if you do need to rest something that's 4 or less. And then we also have the Starter Killer at 2 of. This is something that combos really well with the Law. So you can also use it with the Cat Viper, so you can use these in combination to KO something pretty efficiently while putting some bodies on the board. And then this one also has a trigger, which is relevant because you can basically play it for free, and you can use the effect on play. And then, like we talked about with Luffy, we have Robin, so this one also comes in handy for clearing out the board. 2 of for the Zoro. This is good to have. You can use the leader ability to play something else, and then you can bounce something to play the Zoro, and you can get a quick attack in that can kind of throw off your opponent. And then the real heart of the deck is the Blocker Law, because it does have the blocker ability, but on play, You may return one of your characters to your hand, play one cost 3 or lower character card from your hand. So there's a lot of targets in the deck that have on-play effects that you can use. So you can use these to recycle things. You can have them save cards so they don't get KO'd when being tapped. So then you can use this to play things like the Zoro, and then you can also pull something else up, and then in combo with the leader ability, you can play something like you can play the Law using the leader ability. You can play the Luffy. So this card will combo really well with the leader ability. And then this one just runs one of the Luffy. Again, this is one that could end up closing out games if needed, but this one runs a low count of it. The deck focuses more on other aspects, and this one does run the 8-cost Kid. So this one is going to be more geared towards protecting the 8-cost Kid and establishing that board, and making sure you can survive long enough, again, because with the 4 life, this will help you survive a little bit better by having the opponent focus on this. And then for counters, we have Radical Beam, which is really good for low life decks. So when you get down to 2, this will end up being a 4K counter instead of just a base 2 for 1. So that's a really strong ability. And then you have your 3-up for the Jet Pistol. Again, one of the best removal cards in the game. So you'll definitely want to have at least a few copies of this. And we have Victor Lamb's winning list from the Niagara Falls Treasure Cup. He was playing Green Kid. Again, I've talked about Kid in the past, but this is one of the best leader effects in the game. Once per turn, you can pay 3 Don to trash a card from your hand and switch this leader to active. So you can throw a bunch of Don on him and swing twice in 1 turn, and there's no way that your opponent is able to remove the leader, so they'll have to deal with that. So I actually really like this list, and it's very similar to how I would be running Kid. So with this list, it does run 3 Momo. That's the way I would run it as well. You have a good amount of Wano targets, but a lot of times you are either going to whiff or get rid of some of the better cards that you want with the Supernova type. So you want to use this card efficiently. So you have to be careful about when to use it, so that way you're not getting rid of your good cards. Just, your 4 of Capone. You want to have a bunch of blockers, so that way you can protect your 8-cost Kid. We have your Bonnie for searching. We have Killer, which is a blocker that can help you draw. We have 4 of the Cat Viper. Again, that's going to be really important in this deck, so that way you can combo it. This one will work with the Killer. Oh, and then we have 4 of the Apu for the 2K counters. And then we have 4 of the Izo, another 2K counter. 4 of the Killer. Which this one doesn't run any of the Drakes, which that's the way I've started to approach it as well. A lot of the targets that you want to hit with the Drake are going to be hit by the Killer as well. The only thing is, maybe if you're going against like Blue Doflamingo, is you're going to have a lot of targets that are 4 or less, where the Drake would be more useful. But in most other matchups, I think the Killer will be just fine, and you can reuse it with the Law. 2-of with the Raizo. I think Raizo is good as a 2-of. You don't want to see it too much, and you want more in the late game when you have the 8-cost Kid, so that way you can sit behind the 8-cost and you can just draw cards and get advantage out of it. But it's also a Wano type card, so it'll help your Momo be more consistent. And then we have Okiku. In the past, I was running 3, but now I'm firmly in the camp of running 4. This is a card that you want to see in pretty much every matchup, especially in the mirror. So you want to see it early game. Your goal is to get it down on turn 2 if you're going first. That way you can start resting your opponent's characters. With this deck, you pretty much want to start with like Capone, go Okiku, and you can play like Hawkins, and then you can play a 7-drop Kid to play on curve. And then you have a pretty strong start from there, and it's going to be hard for your opponent to really deal with that. And then we have 3 of the Law. I think 3 is a good number. I could see maybe going down to 2, but I think 3 is good because there's a lot of targets in this deck. Especially if you're running the 4 Killer. That will give you a lot of targets, and you want to be able to reuse the Killer, or you can even pull it back up to use it as a counter if you needed. But this works really well with things like that. Or you can play the Killer, and then you can switch with Okiku. So there's a lot of targets that you want to hit with this deck. And then we have Hawkins, which is one of the most important cards in the mirror match. So you definitely need to have this card if you're going to be playing against a lot of other kids. I can even see going up to 3, especially if you're going into a really heavy kid meta. But I think 2 is a good number. But there's no counter on it, so you don't want to be flooding your hand with cards that you can't counter and you can't play. So being a 5 cost is going to be a little steep. but this is definitely a card you need to have for the mirror. And then this one does run 3 of the 7-drop kids. I do think that maybe 2 is probably a good number, but I could see the merit in having 3. This is also good into the mirror as well as the Kaido matchup. So this is also good for helping to protect your 8-cost kid. It gives you an attacker and a blocker every turn, so this is really good to have. And then, of course, the start of the deck is the 8-cost kid. That prevents it so that way your opponent can't attack the leader. So if you can get the 8-cost kid on the board and fill the board with blockers and have something like Bonnie or Raizo to keep your hand advantage so that way you can protect it better. That's the ideal setup. You want to aim for that in most matchups. And then for counters, I only run 2 of the Paradise Waterfall, which is useful for recycling some of your cards. You can protect some of your key targets like your Hawkins or your Okiku by having it restand so your opponent can't attack into it again. Or you can use it to like reuse your 7-drop kid so you can block multiple times in the same turn. So this is a good counter to have. And next up we have Jose Ignacio Gonzalez's Red Green Law list. So similar to the last list, we see that there's for Otama, for Chopper, we have for Capone here. Then we have the Julie Brani and the Nami. This one runs 3 of the Cat Viper. This one has a higher count for the Brook. Again, this is basically a free card to play down just to get a body on the board, and then you can still use it on to attack. Only 2 copies of Izo, 2 copies of the Killer, 3 copies of Robin. This one has a higher count of the Zoro, so you can more reliably get the rush on the board. 4 copies of Law again. This is one of the most important cards in the entire deck. Just one of for the Drake, searchable off the Bonnie. It's a big body that you can put on the board and still get a KO on something that's rested 4 or less. This one runs 2 Luffy instead of the 1. Again, one of the cards you want to see to maybe help close out the game. And then just one of the starter Law. This is a card that I maybe slept on a lot and wasn't expecting so much, but this one I think does put in a lot of work. On play, you can set up to one of your Supernovas or Heart Pirate type character cards. The cost of 5 or less to set as active. So this will let you get a lot of value out of attacking with a character. You can attack twice. So you can attack twice with your Zoro or your Luffy or your Hawkins, or then you can attack with your Law, and then you can keep it up as a blocker. So this card's pretty versatile, and it combos really well with the other cards in the deck. And then just one of the Hawkins. Again, I talked about how important this was in the kid mirror. So this is also good against opposing green kids. So this is good even just to have as one of, just so you have it as an option. And then 3 of the Jet Pistol. Again, just really strong removal. We have the PPG Miami winner Andrew Dovale. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It was also running Green Kid, like the last list we saw. Again, only 3 of the Momo. There's a lot of ways to whiff with the Momo, so I think 3 is a good number. This one only runs 3 components of the usual 4. I can see the merit in that without having a counter, but again, you do want to have as many cheap blockers as possible so you can better protect your 8-cost kid. And then your typical 4 for the Bonnie, the 4 killers for blocking, 4 Cat Viper, 4 Apu, 4 Izo. This one has 3 Raizo, so a little bit higher on the Raizo count, 4 Okiku. This one has a higher Law count at 4, and then 2 of the Drake. Again, so there's no killer in this list, so it's basically a preference thing. You can choose if you want to have the higher body, or if you want the cheaper cost to play the killer, to use the effect to remove something that you may be able to also reuse with the Law, but the Drake will be more useful once it's on the board because you can swing for 6k. And then 2 of the Hawkins. Again, we talked about how important this was in the mirror match. This is a key card to have in the deck. And then just 2 of the 7-drop kid. Again, this one's really important for the mirror match or against Kaido. It's really bad against blue, or especially against Doflamingo, where they can play the 7-drop Doflamingo to bounce back to hand, so you basically waste your turn. Or they put it at the bottom of the deck using the Mihawk ability, and it just goes away. So it's not worth playing it because your opponent has some really effective ways to deal with it. And then 3 of the 8-cost kid. Again, this is going to be your main strategy with this deck. You want to set up the kid and be able to protect it. And this one has a 2-2 split of Paradise Waterfall and Punk Gibson. So this one allows you to reuse your characters by making them restand. or Pug Gibson, which is really good because it gives you 4K counter, but then also rest one of your opponent's characters 4 or less, so you can stop an opposing attack before they even get a chance to use it, or you can tap down blocker, so that way when you swing in next turn, it's one less blocker that they have. And then on trigger, which is also really good, you can just rest one of your opponent's characters regardless of the cost. So this is really good, and it can throw your opponents off, and this has won me a lot of games, so I think Pun Gibson is one of the best counters in the game. Next up we have Jackson Hoang's list from the Las Vegas Play TCG Treasure Cup. Again, sorry if I mispronounced the name, but he runs a 4 count of Momonosuke, so he values more of the Wano searching. 4 of the Capone, 4 of the Bonnies, 4 of the Killer, 4 of the Cat Viper, 4 of Pooh, 4 Izo. Again, this one is running the Killer over the Drake. Running this as a 3 of I think is a good number. It doesn't go too crazy, but it also gives you a good chance of seeing the card, whether or not you're using it from your hand and using it with the law, or you're playing it from the trigger. And then 3 of the Raizo. Only 3 Okiku. Again, I think it's one of the most important cards in the deck, but it looks like they are doing a 3-3 split of Okiku and Hawkins. So going into the mirror, these are 2 of the most important cards, so I think that's a good idea to have a higher count of these. And then 4 of the Law, again, because they're playing more of the Killer, you get more use out of it, so having the 4 Law makes a lot of sense with that. And then this one does not run the 7 cost kid, but it does run 4 of the 8 cost kid. So again, it's really going to rely on using that strategy, and the whole point of the deck is going to be set up to be built around that and protecting it. And then 2 of the Pun Gibson, again, talked about how this is one of the best counters in the game. This is my amount of choice. If I'm only going to pick one, I would go with Pun Gibson. And then the last list I'm going to be talking about is the Raid and Trade Treasure Cup. This was won by Matteo L. He was also running Green Kid. This one runs 3 of the Momonosuke, 4 of the Beige, 4 of the Bonnie, 4 Killer, 4 Cat Viper, 4 Pooh, 4 Izo, 2 Raizo, 4 Okiku, 4 Law, 1 Drake, 2 Hawkins, 2 7-drop kids, 3 8-cost kids, 3 Paradise Waterfall, 1 Punk Gibson, and then 1 Straw Sword. So if there's one card that I would want to try to find room for, I would say it'd be Straw Sword. Because there's a lot of matchups that I run into where I wish I could just tap down something that was a little bit bigger than what I could reach with what I have in the deck. So this is one of the only ways to tap down the 7-cost kid on the opponent's side, unless you get the trigger with Pun Gibson. But this is also searchable with Bonnie, and it just allows you to rest one of your opponent's characters until set 2, where we can get the Yamato, which will allow us to rest characters that are 6 or less. Until we can get the Yamato in set 2, that allows us to rest characters that are 6 or less. That's not really another way to tap down some of the bigger characters, but this still also wouldn't be able to reach the 7-cost kid. So this is where the Straw Sword comes in handy. There's no other counter or no other effect on it. So this is basically here just to be able to rest something down. But only as a one of. It's also something that if you don't grab it when you see it, you're not going to see it for the rest of the game. So this can be a little unreliable, but it is good to have as an option just in case you do need it, because this could make or break some of the games. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any of the lists from the Fort Worth, Texas Treasure Cup. If you are able to find it, let me know, because I'd love to see the results from that. But I haven't been able to find anything, and it seems like people are already moving on to OP-02 meta. So now we're moving away from the OP-01 meta, so this is kind of like the last hurrah. So as we move into the next set, which is coming out very soon, I just wanted to have a little look back at what was good for set 1, and we had a good variety of decks. It seems that red and green have been the strongest colors in the game so far. With the results from these Treasure Cups, we can see that they were either red, green, or both. Hopefully going forward we'll see some other decks rise to the occasion, but going into OP-02 it looks like that Zoro or Whitebeard will be the decks to beat, but we'll see how that goes and if anything changes. I am looking forward to OP-02. We are going to be getting some interesting leaders as well, so I'm excited for that. So that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know. I appreciate your feedback. You can leave that in the comment section below. Also, let me know if there's other types of content that you like to see as well, and I'll see what I can do. But that's going to be it for today. Be sure to bring along all of your hopes and dreams, and I'll see you in the next video.